Sure. Well, my name is Phil Hatchet Yau, and I'm originally from Sacramento. That's where I grew up. I was born in Taiwan, and I was adopted to family in Sacramento, and stayed there until college time. At which time I moved to the Bay Area to attend art school there, and I lived in the East Bay, in West Oakland. I lived in Rockridge. I lived on Treasure Island in Soma, so kind of the city and to the East Bay both. And I was, I guess tattooing never really seemed like an option as a career choice to me. Growing up, very much conservative Asian parents, even though they were progressive enough to let me do the whole art school thing, as well as I grew up in kind of the hardcore scene in Sacramento, and that's kind of where I was around tattooed people and kind of got my first taste for it, which was a pretty good, vantage point. Looking back, there's a lot of American traditional going on. A lot of the shops I grew up around that I heard American graffiti, and I got my first tattoo from Ryan Tanton at American Graffiti. Very traditional, kind of a Sacred Heart with a knife through it on the back of my arm. So that was a good first exposure to that. Moved to the Bay, did the whole art school thing, and I think it was maybe the middle of my sophomore year, maybe in junior year, I was like, man, I always had this idea that I was gonna be a professional artist and do paintings and stuff, but I was like, man, maybe being a starving artist, and leading the whole bohemian lifestyle thing is not quite as romantic as it's cracked up to be, and maybe I don't want to be struggling and starving for the rest of my life. So I was hanging out at the tattoo shops constantly anyways, getting tattooed. Hung out a lot at Industrial Tattoo in Berkeley, which is where I got quite a few tattoos. Ended up doing counter help there for a while. That's where I met my mentor, Jake Diamond, and between Industrial and Five and Dime at Lake Merritt, that's where I did my apprenticeship simultaneously as my senior year, which is, looking back, it's crazy, holding down a part to full-time job, retail, as well as completing all my senior projects, and as well as doing a full-time apprenticeship, so it was literally no sleep. Riding my bike everywhere. It's rough. It was rough, but it was all worth it. And then moved down to San Diego, and actually, so I've been tattooing maybe, I think I'm going into my 15th year now, and basically all but 6 months have been at the shop. Gil, the owner, he really gave me a shot when he probably shouldn't have. Such a shop with such a legacy. As someone coming in 6 months tattooing. I met him because he had that skate company, TNS Industries, and at the time, there's a lot of artists I looked up to, like Derek Noble and Hudson Ray from Ink Rat in Japan, and Jackie Dunn Smith. A lot of these people that I really looked up to had done skateboard designs for him. And as an apprentice, I was painting constantly, obviously, and I was like, what would be cool is if my first introduction into the tattoo world, in a more official way, is to get a deck amongst those rosters of people that I really looked up to. So I did 2 paintings, for Gil, just in case he doesn't like one. Hopefully the second one would slide through. And he ended up, yeah, exactly. So I was dating someone down here, so I hand delivered them to Gil, and he ended up liking them both, and both got put into production. And he was like, "You tattoo?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just really starting out." I was very honest with them. I was like, "I'm literally just starting," but he saw potential, so he hired me on at 6 months, and so I've kind of a fierce, well-placed loyalty to him in the shop, and that's why I've been here for 14 plus years now, because he's really the one who gave me the shot when no one else probably would or should. So.
That's wild too, especially, that's how I felt when I kind of went into the final stint. You walk in, you're like, oh, I ain't getting hired here, but I'll try.
Right. Absolutely.
And
I mean, when you're an apprentice, at least back then, beggars can't be choosers, and you're just really putting yourself out there, Even my mentor said, hey, like no good shop's gonna hire you, So, when you move down to San Diego, he told me, just get in anywhere that's not a complete scratcher shop, even if you're doing down in PB and you have to work somewhere where you're just like doing little beach bangers all day, that's how you get your chops up, and luckily I ended up here, and yeah, that's what I was doing though, that's how I cut my teeth, was just walk-ins, tattooing anything and everything, I think that's kind of where the newer generation of tattooers is kind of getting cheated a little bit, is having that whole walk-in experience as kind of the backbone foundation of their, I guess, tattooing, right? Like everyone, because of social media or because of whatever else these days, feel kind of the need to specialize right off the bat. And I get it, like back then, if I could have been like, hey, this is my style, I'm just doing traditional, yada, 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 then, that would have been great, but I think you really lose out on getting kind of a well-rounded education of technical skills, right? And seeing almost experimentation too, right? Like it's kind of like going to college. You go in with an idea of what you want your major to be, but maybe you dip your toe in that department and it's really not for you. And you found out, hey, instead of business, I'm really into languages, or just because of your prereqs that you got to take, it's kind of like having to go into college declaring your major right away, not taking any prereqs,
Yeah, who are you going to be in 4 years? And you're like,
right, exactly. I don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know if you don't try, right? So like, who knows? Maybe you go into it saying, hey, I want to do like little micro realistic fine line stuff, and that's what you end up doing, and cool, But like, how do you know you don't like to do Japanese or traditional or larger scale black and gray if you just always limit yourself to that, right? And I think that's where social media, as everyone always says, is such a double-edged sword, because it's great for marketing yourself, but I think it's really detrimental to younger tattooers who, just because if you want to stay busy, you gotta have a brand, you gotta have an aesthetic, you gotta have a look, right? I think for the short term, being a well-rounded tattooer on social media does not bode well for you business-wise, right? Because they're like, well, this guy doesn't really have a style. Well, yeah, he's good at everything, or he can do everything at the very least, right? But if you want the algorithm and all that to pick up your stuff, you have to have a specific look that people will return to. But then what happens when that style gets boring or people move on from that trend, Suddenly you're known for one thing that is no longer relevant, So I think that I got really lucky that I came in at a time, it was like right when Instagram was starting. And I actually almost didn't get on Instagram too. I had literally, this is how old I am. I literally just moved from MySpace to Facebook. And I was like, yo, I cannot download another social media app. But my friend and coworker, Zach Pensmith, he was like, no, Instagram, it's the newest thing, yada, yada, yada. I didn't really get it. So I was like, hey, eventually I made an account. And at the time, it was all chronological. And at the time, there was no algorithm that's pushing certain posts or whatever. So I actually grew a follower base really organically. And a lot of tattoo blogs, because at the time Tumblr was huge too. A lot of tattoo blogs ended up like reposting my stuff, and so I think if I ever benefited from timing, career-wise, that was definitely it for sure.
Yeah. They're especially. I mean, like, how old are you?
I am now. I'm gonna be 38 in September, so I'm 37. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm 38. So yeah, I was right there when that sweet spot kind of hit. Yeah, that millennial into the next phase. I think, I agree with you on a lot of what you said. I think that what a lot of new tattooers are coming in is there's so much to read. There's like, you got Reddit, you got the internet, and you got all that. but you don't have somebody to go up to who's gonna like take you by the shoulders and be like, no, go over here, and then go over here, and then go over here. And then with something like traditional Japanese, like that's a legacy style. That but a lot of these Instagram tattooers are getting into these like new styles and stuff like that. So you don't see traditional Japanese coming out of that Zoomer, like I call them Post Malone tattooers.
Right. Well, things like Japanese, and even I don't do large scale Japanese because it's one of those things that it takes years and years and years to even get decent at it, and with very few exceptions. And it's something that you almost have to do exclusively. A lot of the really good Japanese stuff, as far as like traditional Japanese, let alone putting your own flavor to it, a lot of the solid Japanese large-scale work is coming out from people who only do Japanese. They don't do anything else. And I think that's what makes Japanese really unique, and I respect that, That's why I choose not to do it, I just can't, that's a level of dedication that is just like unfathomable, to really dedicate yourself to not only emulating, but striving towards a style that is absolutely bigger than the individual, right? I think Japanese tattooing is a huge reflection on. It really highlights the discrepancy between Eastern culture and Western culture. Western culture, your first name comes first, and then your family name. And so it's thinking about your family before you think about yourself, right? In the work culture in Japan, you're thinking about the community at large before you're thinking about the individual, right? And I think that Japanese style is very much that, right? Where you're really trying to carry on this much larger legacy style before you are or should be even putting your own imprint to it. Your natural personality and style is going to come out in your work regardless. But I think Japanese is more so about following these rules and knowing the folklore and the history and the style and the visual form of something that was developed long before you got onto the scene and will be there long after. Whereas opposed to a lot of these other styles, I feel like it's more about expressing your own artistic creativity, And I think that's one huge reason why a lot of the newer tattooers don't do Japanese, is because with social media and everything, it's so much about like, you're the star, you're the main character, that it's not appealing to these new people, because good Japanese is not about that person, So I think that's a huge reason why you don't see a lot of Japanese coming out of younger TikTok type of tattooers, as you put it,
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was interested about what you said is, so you're kind of around the Bay Area. That's kind of where you're settled in. But then you came to San Diego. Like, how did that happen?
Well, I was dating someone at the time who was in San Diego, and we were long distance. We were together basically from the time I was 19 and then all the way to 29. So better part of a decade, And so I always said, hey, my tattooing comes first, and I got to finish school out of respect for my parents, whether I thought I, wanted to continue college or not. My parents are one of those types that college, or an education rather, comes before all else. And whether I agree with that or not, I respect my parents enough to, fulfill their wishes in that way, because they have given me a lot of latitude. Especially from the culture I come from, to even have a major in art, to get my BFA in fine arts, painting, drawing, they never forced the whole, typical Asian doctor, lawyer type of career path down my throat, but they said it was important to them that I finish college, and so I did that out of respect for them. And so once I was done with college and I was done with my apprenticeship and I got my blessings from my mentor, I moved down to San Diego. Which ended up being pretty fortuitous because of the location I ended up as, but also because, being a military town, it was a never-ending supply of sailors who, have younger skin, they, have a steady paycheck, they want cool shit, so as far as clientele, I could not have ended up in a better place to start off my career than San Diego.
Did you just come down with like a, I mean, I know you were dating somebody, but did you just come down with like a couple $100 in your pocket and like a dream?
Kinda, a little bit. I didn't really know anybody except for the person I was dating and their family. But but yeah, no, I was really, I was, at the time, I did have a sense of wanderlust in the sense that I was down to go anywhere, and it didn't really bother me to start a new life. Now, I may have a different answer for you, but back then I was totally down to pick up and move, and it was exciting at the time, and you know, being in a completely different city and a different shop than you apprentice in, I think was kind of a blessing in disguise. Not being viewed as the apprentice. No matter what people say. If you work at the shop you apprenticed at, you're kind of always looked at as the memories with all the other tattooers are you're the apprentice. Exactly. So I think being here, it allowed me to maybe take some more technical and artistic risks that I might not have taken at the shop I apprenticed in. Be that good or bad, I learned some hard lessons as far as the technical side of tattooing. That I was like, not going to try that again, or you know what, this actually worked. Let's see how far I can take it. That's why I've always been really almost cavalier at some points with the things I was willing to try. I remember, I believe it was maybe early 2010s when I remember Rempe and some of the kind of more bold line traditional guys were starting to use unbelievably thick lines at the time. We're talking like open 16 shader, like just really, or even more than that, on simple designs. And I was like, given how, what I knew at the time about like just kind of the aging process of tattoo and stuff, I was like, what if I reverse that? So I remember I was talking with Esther Garcia, who owns Butterfat Studios in Chicago. I was like, what if I reverse that? So what if I did that bold line style, but I did those lines in negative space, and then so as it ages, the lines actually get finer. Like, what if I did that? So I had a client, Max, who let me do his entire arm, blank arm. So now he has a kind of a blackout look, but with all these negative space traditional designs. And I don't want to. I'm sure I wasn't the first person to do traditional and negative space. But at the time, I didn't know of anybody, and I actually took inspiration from a lot of black work guys, because at the time, I mean, to this day, black work, tribal, neo-tribal, whatever you want to call it, geometric, they were doing that exact technique that I was talking about, But, I as far as I know, I was one of the first people to, experiment, bring that over to traditional, I really looked up to people like, obviously, like Eddie Deutsch and Ed Hardy, a lot of the people who have throughout history really pushed the idea of not only traditional imagery, but the technical execution of traditional and what traditional could be. Having apprenticed in the Bay Area, obviously I was surrounded by these just mind-blowing revolutionaries in solid tattooing. All the guys at Blackheart, at Seventh Son, Tattoo City. I could keep going on and on and on. It was San Francisco was, and still to a certain degree was mecca of tattooing. And very much back in the day. I was there from 2005 and I left right before the tech boom in 2010. So I think, yeah. So I think I enjoyed the last of the really glory days of the city before, it kind of went downhill a little bit as far as just the city in general. But, still solid tattooers up there, just, continuously pushing amazing work. And I think that apprenticing in that kind of environment gave me a really unique and amazing perspective on I guess, traditional style, in the sense that having the reverence and respect to preserve, I guess, the important stylistic notes as well as the history of traditional tattooing, but at the same time, not being afraid to really push the imagery and the form further than it was. So you're not just like replicating, which is totally cool. I'm always down to just do a straight up traditional tattoo right off the sheets. Can't beat that. But there's also no sin in trying to push it forward or in a different direction, as well.
Would you say there's maybe like a balance?
There's a balance, yeah. There's always a balance, right? Like, I think that especially in today's world, anything done with reverence and genuine, I guess, intent and respect, I guess, will always translate visually. I think that people who have no regards, no respect, no deep admiration for a style, who immediately come in and try to fuck with it before they even learn the basics or learn where it came from, let alone care about where it came from. I think that will always come off as phony and corny. Like, and I'm not naming names, but I think that anybody who really has respect and admiration for I guess the shoulders upon which we stand, and have given its proper respect and paid homage, it's an homage to all that, while adding, I always say that tattooing as a whole, but even more so, I think tattooing as a whole is like languages, and each is communication, visual communication. And I think that every single style of tattooing is basically a certain language, like Japanese, Spanish, Italian, whatever it is, And within those styles, every language has its own dialect, there's like let's take traditional, right? Traditional is its own language. Every type of traditional is its own dialect, and within each of those dialects, each artist is basically writing their own poetry. Is basically their creative voice, the way of speaking, the way that they choose to string their words together in each particular dialect is essentially a visual representation of that, and is that's their work, is poetry. So, if we both do traditional, we both totally understand each other. We both have a common baseline of that language, right? We look back at Bob Shaw, Wicks, Waters, all these guys who basically created the language for us, We are now able to create our own dialects, and within each of those dialects, we're able to communicate with each other. So we all know where it came from, and that's why we can appreciate each other's work, is because we're like, I would have never thought of that, because I know exactly where that image or where that little trick or where that whatever came from, and I liked how you processed it in your brain and how it came out onto the skin, And so I think that's great, but a lot of people who just try to be too fancy and cute right up front, I feel like they didn't even learn the basic language before they tried to write poetry, No, you gotta learn the language first.
That's such an interesting way to look at it, and I think you're really onto something, because if you have a language, right, but you try to do it in just the way your own, without understanding the principles of it, you end up just speaking nonsense. And that's kind of what I took away from that, because that really does make a lot of sense. It's like what they teach in art school, learn the rules.
Right. Yeah, I think that, there's very, very few people, back to the whole analogy thing, but it's a closer analogy because, it's artistic. When you do figure drawing or when you do life drawing, you are always taught to start general and then get specific, right? when you do a sketch, you first of a figure, you start with just the general motion of the figure, and then you kind of like plot where the shoulders are, where the hips are, where the head's turned, and then from there you can kind of get the contours and the muscles going, and then you can do the rendering of lighting and all that. A lot of people are just trying to get the masterpiece like right off bat without doing the preliminary work, and it's very apparent.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. I'm sure you've seen it just as much. You can tell a difference between someone newer and someone later is how fast they try to get to that rendering. Whereas, like a real master just blocks it all in, and they practically have a render by the time with just the basics, and you're just like, wow. Especially with figure drawing, which is one of my personal favorites. Well, I was going to ask something else, but what is that artistic language to you? What is tattooing to you? That you've understand. Is it the language?
Yeah.
Is it the
Tattooing to me, I think at the end of the day, is just another form of communication. Whether it's a reflection of basically, I think it's a reflection of kind of where your mindset is at. Whether you're having stories told through you, or whether you're telling your own, or whether you're just trying to give off a vibe. I think that one of the things I always tell my clients is one of the things I disliked about the whole reality show thing, as well as I guess it perpetuated this narrative that every tattoo has to have visual symbolic meaning, and I don't believe that's the case at all. I feel like that's a very surface level of, I guess, non-tattooed people getting into it, trying to justify the first tattoo, right? Like you see these people with all these tattoos, and it's crazy, right? Like, as someone with no tattoos, you're like, why, how would these people do this? So, to them, it's at least it was still, there's a sense of taboo there, when I was growing up, and I feel like there's no TV show without story or conflict. And I feel like this narrative of, oh, everything has to have symbolic meaning, I believe that is just because it would make really fucking boring TV if people just admitted the truth and they just wanted a cool looking tattoo. And long after your little, Pinterest quote, may not hit you as hard, or that, Lana Del Rey lyric may not, strike your heart as much as it did in the moment, you're gonna still have that tattoo. So first and foremost, make sure it looks good, and make sure it's gonna last. And yeah, I think that, but tattooing as a whole, I think it's just our need, I guess our basic need to connect with other people. I think that's what it comes down to. Tattooing is our need to say, hey, I relate to you. Or, hey, this is who I am at the very least, so maybe you can relate to me. I think it's us, as much as of an introvert as a lot of us are, I feel like just having tattoos is us connecting to the world we live in, or at least trying to understand the world we live in a little bit more, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't even ask you what kind of style do you consider yourself? Like what kind of stuff do you do? Since we're
I think I connected heavily with American traditional tattooing when I first started. So a lot of my work, if not the majority of my work, will always have a very strong traditional foundation on a technical level. So I guess all styles of American traditional, and then I can get a lot more illustrative with my work. I've, in the past couple of years, really branched out into black and gray portraiture, as well as just black and gray as a whole. As I said, I try to be really well-rounded, because I can see merit in almost all styles, at least elements of almost all styles, to the point that I can take inspiration from maybe Japanese, or I can take inspiration from, black and gray Chicano, without having to necessarily, line for line, emulate that particular style. I think that's what's great about, like we were talking earlier, about being well-rounded, right? It's like learning multiple languages, right? At that point, and you have the vocabulary, because at the end of the day, tattoo is communication, and the more vocabulary you have, the more, I guess, accurately you can voice your, I guess, thoughts, right? And so when you have a whole arsenal behind you of, hey, I understand, appreciate, and I respect, fine line, black and gray Chicana work. I can, respect and I understand American traditional, and yeah, and so on and so forth. I think your work becomes more unique, right? Like I feel like I feel like nobody actually has a style of tattooing that was completely original, that was born out of them and only them. I think that we just choose to collage our visual experiences in different ways. And the people with the more unique styles just have, I guess, put the ratios of the different styles together in a way that maybe hasn't been done before or wasn't done before, right? But the ingredients, no one created the ingredients. The ingredients were already there. It's just how we put it together. And I think that, so at the end of the day, as what style do? I like doing any tattoo that is going to look great now and going to look great 30 years from now, That's my style.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've seen you tattoo. I've seen your work. I love it personally. I think it's really good. Yeah, I mean, well, I'll probably get some pictures and stuff, and then have them pan over as you're talking about it. I mean, so, I mean, well, I already know how much this place means to you because you've been here for so long.
Master Tattoo will forever be my home. No matter where I go, no matter how far I wander to, this will always be home base, Even if, God forbid, it's not here, decades from now or whatever. At least for me, in my memory and in my heart, this is a very special place. If you've ever been here, you'll notice there's just such a heavy focus on tradition, and Gil has really made sure that our forefathers who created the shop as well as worked here all the way up until today are very well respected and visually represented on our walls and in books, and even our staircase has amazed all the artists who've come through. I feel like being in such close and massive proximity to all this source traditional material really keeps me grounded and keeps me focused and doesn't allow me to wander too far away from kind of where I came from. It's really easy, to go off on a visual tangent and maybe get lost along the way. But being literally surrounded, you can see this place, literally surrounded and crushed with all this amazing, original flash from the 1940s all the way through the 70s. I think is some of the later stuff we have. That we have a couple pieces from the 30s. Really keeps my mind subconsciously focused on the history of it and kind of the I guess the birth of the style that I have sprungboard my career off of. But so it's kind of like traditional by osmosis almost, and I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you clearly have such a strong passion for the industry. Like it shows very strongly, especially everything you're telling me right now. It's almost making me kind of blink a little bit. I was like, it's like you said, all the flash and everything. It is beautiful. It's awe-inspiring. Are there any idols that you have that like people, or maybe a few specific people where you're like, I want to be like them?
I do, and back when I was an apprentice, before I was an apprentice, all the way today, yeah, there's amazing uncountable amount of artists that I've looked up to, and really appreciated their work and everything. I think though some of my tattoo idols haven't necessarily, I mean, all of them solid, great tattooers, but I think that the artists that stick out into my mind that have had the most impact on me, a lasting impact on me, have not necessarily been for their amazing work, but have been more for, I guess, their character and how they've carried themselves and how I've interacted with them. Luke Stewart, owner of Seventh Son. The first time I wandered into that shop, I literally wanted just, three little initials on my wrist, with my partner, and you know, he's booked. He owns, the whole shop, but he was absolutely not above doing those little initials for us. And he, there's same initials, but he decided to draw it in two different ways, so we would each have our own. And I ended up getting my whole back tattooed from him because of that interaction. Just the humility and kind of like the lack of tattitude that you experience from other people. Just and not only that, but just the care that he took in taking care of clients, big or small. I think really has to this day stuck out to me. I mostly work by appointment only now, but if everyone's busy and I have a little downtime and somebody comes in and wants a little doodad, I'm not above helping out. And I think a large part of that, is because of that interaction. I'll always remember, looking back. I mean, at the time I was like, oh, this is amazing, but looking back, I really see now like I guess the genuineness of that interaction, and I really liked it. Or someone, another person that comes to mind is Tim Hendricks. One of the nicest guys in the industry, like hands down, the nicest. It's easy for a guy with such strong impact on the tattoo scene and the industry. Both through his works and accomplishments. It'd be easy for him to have an inflated ego, but nothing of the sort. Like he didn't know who I was. We've never interacted before. I wasn't homies with like his best friend or something, but the first time I met him I was working on this basically 2-day front piece of this giant wolf on one of my friends who's this huge dude, so it was, a very large scale piece. And second day we did it, we were at Ink and Iron in Long Beach at the convention, and Tim wandered by and he was just stood there for about 5 minutes looking at it, and then he asked if he could take a picture, and so he took a picture. And before I knew it, my phone was going off because he had posted that picture onto his main page on Instagram and exposed me to, his countless followers at the time, and really, sprungboard my career, to the next level from where I was at. And, didn't even, didn't ask for anything, there was no ulterior motive. He just did it out of the kindness of his heart, and I ended up being, good friends with him, and he's amazing, and so things like that really stick with you, having that person, because especially, today, as far as technically amazing tattooers, it's dime a dozen, Back in the day, you had your few greats and a bunch of goods, out there. And it was just basically whatever magazine decided to publish you, or those people at the time, And so it was a limited list at the time of just like great tattooers, Nowadays, floodgates open, jig is up, and there is just uncountable, amazing technical tattooers. So I think now more than ever, the next thing everyone looks at is like, hey, who is a good person in general, who doesn't have an inflated ego, who's going to be respectful, who's going to treat you right, who's not going to give you rock star attitude, and, thankfully a lot of those people exist, and a lot of them are from the old school, and, not every old school tattooer is this ornery, grumbly old asshole, There's plenty of guys who are solid through and through, their work, their character, from day one, and that's who has like had the most impact on me. I'm very sensitive to how my clients' experience are with me. And we all have off days. We all have. I'm sure there's days where I was maybe shorter. But at the end of the day, it's never intentional. And yeah, and I'm unfortunately one of the earbud tattooers, when I work, just because I have really severe ADHD. And while it does help me focus, I am definitely very like distracted by just any little thing outside of our little bubble. So I'll have noise canceling in, but I've always there's a certain point where I was tattooing my husband, and I put in the earbuds, and he's like, "Hey, do your clients think you're rude for putting earbuds in?" And I never even crossed my mind. I was like, you know what? Let me kind of shift that, for a second. And so, if I need to put earbuds in because the shop's humming or whatever, I'll always, make clear to my clients, hey, just so I have these in. This is the reason I have them in. It's not because I don't like you or whatever. I actually can still hear you, if you want to have a conversation, or, if you prefer, if chatting away, like helps you get through this process easier, I'll gladly take them out and, have a conversation. I'm more than happy to do that. I love all my clients, so I do not mind doing that at all. But this is the reason I do it. It's more efficient for me. I don't want you to take offense. I'm so sorry. So just being, that communication and that kind of level of, I guess, thoughtfulness to, our clients or our coworkers or whatever the case may be, be kind to yourself, but also be kind to others,
Yeah. Well, I tell people, this is a realization that came to myself, but when I talk about tattooing and do as a profession, as something that you give to people, I say it's a trust-based industry, not a talent-based industry. It's a trust-based industry. People would rather get a tattoo by someone they trust and they like. That's maybe not even as great. You can be the most technical artist in the world, but if someone even if you're not even an asshole, if they just trust this person, if it's their friend, or if it's just someone that they're close to or they feel close to, they're just gonna, and that's where a lot of, like when people are looking for a tattoo, like their first tattoo, who do they ask? They ask their friend, who does your tattoos? And which is why word of mouth is so strong. But people, you're changing their bodies forever.
Right.
You're changing their bodies. I mean, is that how you see the customer experience?
Yeah, I think that I definitely always ask, getting a tattoo, getting a tattoo in general is a huge show of trust on the client's part, regardless. Now, if we're talking about, kind of when they hand over the reins to the artist and get something specifically from a specific artist because they enjoy their aesthetic, they enjoy their work, and sometimes freehanding something or having a rough sketch or whatever, it requires it even more so, because you're not it's not like a set design, it's not like the expectation is that you're going to replicate this to this, So when you do a tattoo that has a more of a loose process, it's even more of a show of trust, But I always make this analogy, right, to my clients. When you go to a 5-star Michelin award-winning restaurant, you go there because you want the experience that that particular chef is offering. You don't go to a fine dining experience and go to the kitchen and hand the chef a recipe card. You don't shoulder surf a chef and being like, a little more paprika, just a little. Okay, stop. That's good. You hand over. When you're dealing with the premium of any industry, whether it's tattooing, whether it's in the culinary space, whatever the case may be, if you're paying the money, waiting the times you're waiting, putting yourself through all this to have that experience, you're kind of robbing yourself of that experience if you kind of art direct, if you kind of micromanage, right? That's the importance of a great consultation. I know what the parameters are. I know what you're expecting. I want a tattoo this big on my shoulder, and I want it in this style that you do. and this subject matter. And from there, I'll take the reins. So just having a clear, again, communication is all it takes. Clear communications of what the client's expectations are, and at that point, like actually listen to them, hear them out, make your suggestions, talk about a general game plan, and from there, it's your responsibility to give the client something that they'll be stoked on.
Cool, cool. I mean, I held you here longer than I think you're okay, okay. Well, what does the future hold?
The future. Who knows? As far as me, I'm just going to be doing what I've been doing until I can't do it anymore. As far as the future for tattooing, I don't know. I really don't. I'm sorry? AI art. Obviously, it's unfortunate that, technology has kind of done the thinking for a lot of us, and now it's taking, doing a lot of the creativity for us. I think it can be used in a way that is ethical and that is productive. References have been around as long as tattoo's been around. Every single traditional flash that we, hold up to such high regard, it came from a non-tattooer inspiration, whether it's a magazine or album cover or whatever it is, has been translated through tattooing, to be this iconic thing that is what it is. The infamous Sailor Jerry crawling wolf piece, that was from an advertisement. That wasn't from Jerry didn't come up with that in his mind and draw it, So as far as AI art is concerned, I think it can be used to our benefit as far as like it gives you a great specific reference that you're looking for that we dictate, right? Like I'm looking for a girl head, three-quarter view, slightly turned up. Cool. Now I have that general reference. Now I can put my hand to it and make this thing that I couldn't previously have made because there wasn't a live model or a photo reference that had that specific enough of an angle that I wanted in my head, right? So we can use it as a tool. Of course, there's going to be people who can use and abuse it, who, hey, come up with this design for me, and cool, this is exactly what you're getting. Well, cool, like that, you're taking it back to the craft, but as far as it's just lazy, but I think that most things are always going to be a double-edged sword, and as far as AI and everything, AI cannot do what we do. AI cannot give a client the human interaction that a lot of clients hold as a very important aspect of tattooing. AI cannot put the needle to skin. AI cannot regulate, how your client is feeling, during the process. AI cannot, do all these things that, we as human beings and as artists are able to provide to our clients. So at the end of the day, the people who are most threatened by AI, I feel like are the people who need it the most. The people who have nothing else to fall back on. The people who, am I dubious of AI as a whole? Oh yeah, for sure, But as it applies to tattooing, the thing I love about tattooing, and that gives me great hope and security, is that no matter what, no matter how cool your marketing gimmick is, what kind of TikToks you make, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, if you are genuine and good at your art and craft, and if you treat people right, you're always going to be fine. You're always going to have business. You're set. And that brings me a lot of comfort. The people who have to worry are the people who don't have those qualifications, or the people who are faking it till they make it, or faking it for the time being until people realize, oh, they can't really tattoo, or oh, they're actually kind of shitbags. Like the people who are well-rounded and solid, we're always going to be okay. So as far as technology, I think that it will I think it's sad, but at the same time, it will weed out a lot of the people who, guess what? You were replaceable by AI because AI did it better than you. So to me, it's AI is no different than a wave of new tattooers. Those who belong are going to stick around, and those who are just there to make a quick buck or because they think it's cool or whatever, they're going to fizzle out and go away, and I get to fix their tattoos.
Put in the work.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was always brought up thinking, if you're not where you think you should be, you're just not working hard enough.
If what?
If you're not where you think you should be, you're just not working hard enough.
Right.
That's just kind of like how I've always been.
Absolutely.
Like grabbing and pulling, just trying to climb myself up. Cool. I mean, man, we went through everything and more. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks for making it easy, and thanks for including me as a part of your project.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
For doing it.
Of course,
And
yeah.
I really
Can't wait to see the
appreciate
final product. It'll be fun.
Yeah.